studio, it's our pleasure to welcome now Senator Briggs Hopson. He represents District 23 that incorporates Issaquah, Warren, and Yazoo counties over there in the western part of the state. Serves as the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. So we're trying to get him. We got him out. Senator, are you there? All right,
I'm
great.
back, Gerard. My
Right,
technological expertise caused me to drop you for just a moment, so my apologies.
No problem. We are pleased that you were able to join us today. It's been a while. I don't think you and I have talked during the session. We've had your colleague, Senator Harkins. He's the guy that has to raise the money, and you're in charge of spending it, I guess we could say, in the Senate. We've had him on several times. It was a bit of a tumultuous session, but it didn't feel like we got a whole lot of just marquee legislation across the finish line. And, of course, we left a big hole in that we don't have a budget, and we're presently awaiting Governor Tate Reeves to tell us when you guys are going to come back to the Capitol and get that done. Your thoughts about the session first?
Well, people said that certainly left undone was the budget, and that's paramount for me as the appropriations chair to make sure we get the budget done. But obviously we had the big tax plan, and that was a big issue. Josh has probably covered that many times with you on the radio and in other venues. Certainly some things that people overlook, I feel like, are legislative redistricting and judicial redistricting. We had to go back and, as many listeners know, had to redistrict 2 parts of the state in the Senate, 1 part in the House. Since then, the court has determined that one of the Senate areas, which is the DeSoto County area, will have to be redrawn or is being redrawn again by the Elections Commission of Mississippi. And so there's still uncertainty. I think I saw in the news either last night or this morning that that's being challenged. That proposal is being challenged. So who knows where that ends up. I do think we will probably go forward with the Hattiesburg area elections for the Senate and that northeast Mississippi area, Columbus, Tupelo, Houston area for the House, and having people run there. And then also judicial redistricting. And I know from formerly serving as the Judiciary Aid Chair that's a big deal. People overlook it. There was a lot of work done by Senator Bryce Wiggins and Representative Kevin Moran and many others that had input on that. So trying to get balance with our judges on caseloads and population, areas of growth and decline, and how you kind of level things out for our judiciary to make sure that we've got our districts right and fair caseloads. And DAs too, by the way, because when you change a circuit court district, you change a district attorney's district too. So that's an issue that had to be addressed.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because a lot of people are concerned and certainly that are involved in the judiciary at various levels in the state. They are concerned about that, and they pay attention to that. It shouldn't matter, honestly, but it sort of does. I mean, judges, and no disrespect to them, they're human, but more importantly, you get a jury, and often they can be a little biased. I mean, that's just reality. That happens. And so I know as a business person, the small number of lawsuits I had in my 35 years was welcome, but the couple that I did have, venue was a big deal, so much that, lawyers will go to bat to fight to get change of venues if they feel like they can't get a fair trial in a particular one.
Look, I'm an attorney, so the judiciary is extremely important to me. Having good judges on the bench, it starts with that, first of all, good judges on the bench, because they can help dictate how the court proceedings go. They will dictate largely how the proceedings go. Obviously, the attorneys have a good amount of say in what is done there to make sure that in the case of a jury trial, the jury's getting the proper information, that people are getting justice that they deserve. Obviously, bench trials, it's so critically important to have good judges that look at things from a balanced perspective. They look at, they put aside the personalities, they put aside the likes and dislikes, and they're trying to administer the justice that we all deserve. The old picture of the blindfolded lady with the scales on either end. That's what you want as an attorney and as a general citizen. When you're in the court, you just want to be treated fairly and properly under the law.
That's absolutely true. All right, so let's talk about a special session. What can you tell us that is the latest buzz, if there is any, about when you guys might be called back?
Well, I don't know when we'll be called back. I can't tell you. We had a meeting with the governor a few weeks ago and talking about, how do we get to the place we want to be, and that is finishing up the budget. And as he's rightly stated in some press conferences, people don't need to hit a panic button. This has been done a number of times. We've not been able to conclude the budget by the end of session. We have until June the 30th. You want to finish it during session because it's what we really want to do. The good news is we set aside days. We didn't use all the days during the session, so we won't have to dip in extra money to get a special session when we didn't get paid for many days that we didn't take during the session. So that's the good news. The difficult part for me and others that are involved in this process is we're going to have some meetings and are having meetings about trying to get some general frameworks around the budget. In fact, pretty close to where we want to be on the budget before we come back in. Nobody wants us to come in. I don't want to come in and sit around for a few days trying to figure things out. I want to have a kind of a good idea about where we stand overall, both Senate and House, to get something that everybody can be happy with. And then we'll probably have to tweak a few things when we get in and then try to get it passed, certainly before the June 30th deadline, because folks, agencies and anybody that's going to be spending your money, whether it's corrections, mental health, Medicaid, et cetera, the more lead time they can have going into July the 1st, which is the beginning of our fiscal year, the better they can prepare for what they want to do and how they want to set up their annual budget.
Once you are called back, Senator, and we're talking to Senator Briggs Hopson, he chairs the Senate Appropriations Committee. Do you have any feel for how long it's going to take? I mean, do you feel like you and your counterparts down the hall in the House are fairly aligned on what the budget should look like?
I think there is general alignment and agreement that we want to have a fiscally responsible, conservative budget. I think we recognize that there are many agencies that have particular, what I'm going to call one-time needs. Maybe they need a revised, updated computer system, for example. Maybe they've got a program that they were really trying to get off the ground, and we want to emphasize that. We've got agreement on several of those things. As a matter of fact, before we left the session, we had an agreement on about 70%. I'd say anywhere from 2/3 to 70% of the budget. But what is true in most years is true this year, that the 10 or 12 or 15 budgets that you have that you don't agree on are usually the most difficult because they've got a lot of tentacles and a lot of operations issues. And so rather than just throwing numbers up there, I appreciate that the House members feel the same way we do in the Senate, that you want to be methodical and thoughtful about trying to make sure those budgets are done right, not just throw money at it and say you were done. We want to be specific about what their mission is, how we can help them accomplish that and serve the citizens. And so that's what we're kind of getting into the weeds about right now.
Based on your discussions with LBO, DFA, and all the other parties that are involved, state economists, do you feel like that we're likely to produce surplus again? This is 5-6 years in a row that we've generated surpluses.
We are presently, I haven't received the end of April numbers yet, Gerard, but we are presently about level for this month. Maybe up. We might end up being $1 million or $2 million, which would put us around $8 or $10 million ahead of revenue projections for the year. Now that's about 70 million or so down year to year, but it's ahead. We have budgeted under our revenue number, which is a good thing, very conservative, and I'm proud to be a part of that, and along with my colleagues. So we've got a cushion there. We've got a cushion where we can, still have a safety number there, a safety net, if things go bad. Now I'm very aware and not concerned. I'm just keeping a keen eye towards some of the things that are happening federally. It's going to affect Mississippi. Really would love to have some information on what the federal government's going to do about Medicaid, for instance. There's talk about whether there's going to be a block grant for Medicaid, or there could be a change in the FMAP, in other words, the federal matching percentage. That has a major effect on what we do in Mississippi. I mean, a percent is 80 some odd $1 million. 1% change in the FMAP. I mean, you've got a number of things at the federal government that can affect what we're doing here. Obviously, any changes to MDOT, that could have an impact on what we do. And other Medicaid, DHS, CPS, those items certainly are.
Senator, sorry to interrupt you. We got a break upon us. Can you hang around? I want to talk about the tax stuff and how that went down. You good?
Sure. Yeah,
all right,
happy to hang around.
Briggs Hopson. That's great. Senator Briggs Hopson, we're coming right by. It is open. We're visiting with Senator Briggs Hopson. He represents District 23 along the western part of the state, Warren, Issaquah, and Yazoo counties. But more importantly, he's chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, and that's important right now because we got to do some appropriating. We don't have a budget yet, and they're just awaiting the call from the governor. Senator, let's talk about the tax bill that ultimately made its way to the governor's desk for signature. I mean, it's old news now, but there were some drafting errors that were noticed. Unfortunately, for the Senate at least, it was after the bill passed the Senate. How did it get through so many people, Senator? I mean, I think that's the question that is on the minds of a lot of Mississippians. You and your colleagues, the lieutenant governor, the drafting lawyers, others involved in some of the technical aspects of it. What do you make of that?
Well, let me before we go to that real quickly. I represent Madison County too, Gerard.
That's right. I should know that because you've been at our events and we appreciate that. So our data needs to be updated. Thank you, Senator, for pointing that out. Yeah, and we're glad to have you represent Madison County.
Part of Madison County as well.
Look, going back to the tax plan, let me just frame it this way: that we obviously had our own tax plan. The Senate, the House had a tax plan, House Bill 1, which is ultimately what got passed with amendments. The Senate tax plan that we agreed to lowered the 4% to 3%. All this. It had it had some other features in it involving the gas tax, a few other things. After the two items went to after the House bill came back over, and this goes to the the Finance Committee. It came from Ways and Means in the House, and it went to the Finance Committee, and they worked on a proposal in finance to try to put what I'm going to call guardrails on the tax elimination plan. So to go to a tax elimination, you have some particular items you have to meet, and the biggest part of it was to say that your revenue and your spending would have enough of a gap where there wouldn't be a collapse or fall off a cliff type of situation where if you were continuing to eliminate income tax and you had no revenue to support it, you'd at least freeze or hold the tax at that level. And it had step downs throughout the year, which was different than what we had proposed in the Senate. Apparently, again, I'm not on finance, so I'm not involved in that part of it, but apparently in the late hours as they were working through the details, I think there was a change from basis points to percentage in that process somewhere on the staff, and somebody made a change, and it didn't coincide with what was represented, and that is that there would be this gap of a few $100 million before tax elimination would start to take place. It reduced that amount to a very small amount. Now, there was another technical problem in it too, I'm told, that is included in some language later on. The tax cut itself would not be as much as was anticipated. So I think there were at least two errors in that bill, that one of which could accelerate the tax cut, the second of which would make the tax cut a very small amount.
Right.
And I think the gist of it is, first of all, the next 4 years is going to be a tax reduction anyway. And as some people have said, you've got 4 years to correct this problem, and hopefully that people that recognize there need to be a proper guardrails on this, or there needs to be mechanisms in place that can be corrected in time. So while it definitely had some errors that were were not intended to be in there, that those things can be corrected over time. And I think reasonable minds will come together and recognize that you should have some similar type guardrails in place to ensure that we're doing this the responsible way.
Well, I appreciate that. I know that's been the Senate's position, but as you know, the House had a bill, originally HB 1, that would have phased out the income tax without any sort of tests being applied, guardrails, as you say. Of course, they did have an increase in sales tax to help offset the loss of income tax revenue. But it's just kind of curious if the House is on board, you seem to be representing that maybe we need some sort of protections like that. Why didn't they stop right then and say, hey, guys, this isn't what you meant. We realize this. Let's work something out. And I'm not asking you to speak on behalf of the Speaker and Representative Lamar. I'm just curious were there any discussions between the bodies about that and the leadership?
Well, let me. Obviously, I'm connected to the Appropriations Chair, and I'm connected to leadership in the Senate. But I was not in all those discussions, so I don't know what was discussed. Actually, I have heard from my colleagues some of the discussions that took place, and I do think there were some technical aspects. I mean, I understand that if the House would have taken it and tried to make a change, it could have been subject to a point of order that may have killed the whole thing. So that probably was a dilemma for the House to some degree. I don't know. I really don't know what the House was thinking on whether they could overcome that point of order or whether they just felt like, let's move forward with the tax cut. We can correct all this later. Or if they felt like we're satisfied the way it is, we're just going to lay it out there and see what happens. But that's a discussion you'd have to have with them, Gerard.
Fair enough. So before we went to break, you mentioned some things that you have some concerns about, and I think legitimate concerns. We don't really have clarity from the federal government. As you well know, lots of money flows into Mississippi, in particular, to fund the Medicaid program, which you talked about, the possibility of changing the FMAP. That's the federal match, the federal component. And in Mississippi, that's 78% of our program, because we do have the lowest per capita income in the country, and that is what the federal match is based on. We receive the highest match, highest percentage from the federal government to fund our state program. That's a lot of money, as you know. In fact, that's more than our general fund budget, the amount of money we get from the federal government that is used in the Medicaid program. And right now, that's just up in the air as the Congress is meeting what looks like over the next couple of months to produce a final bill. How in the world do you budget, Senator, without having any clarity on that?
That's the billion-dollar question, Gerard.
Multi-billion.
That's right, multi-billion-dollar. We just have to take our best, the most information we have. And that's one of the reasons I think it's important to budget late in the session. You have an opportunity to get more information. Obviously, you don't want to budget in June because it gives your agency so little time to get prepared. But as far as the timing of where we are right now, it's not a major concern for me. Having said that, if they don't do anything before the end of their fiscal year, which is the end of September, they meet the feds, we just have to take the information we've got, which right now is no change. And we're going to budget something in Medicaid that we think will, if things stay status quo, we think will be okay. I'm going to say this very, you can go back and look at this clip. There is a decent chance we could walk back into a deficit situation in Medicaid in January. That is not unheard of. In fact, for many, many years when I first got in the legislature, we dealt with that every year. We walked into a situation where there was a deficit needed for Medicaid. Typically during the session, it went down some, but you did have a deficit you had to take care of because we never know how much money is going to be spent in Medicaid. We never know how much medical treatment people are going to get. So we're going to take a best guess at where that's going to be, and knowing that we could walk back in January and have to get some money out of capital expense, or if we've got enough general fund money there, have to fund that. And if they make a big change starting in the next fiscal year, the feds, that could have a dramatic change. Next session. Next session, we'll see what happens with Medicaid.
And you make a good point about possibly covering any kind of deficit situations with some of these other funds. So you guys have been very conservative, very prudent, I believe, in ensuring that these surpluses have not been spent, but rather have been transferred to many of these other funds, rainy day fund, CapEx fund, I can't remember, this budget stabilization fund and others that I think was a good move, a conservative move, to just have hanging out there just in case, because you don't know. But here's what I'm concerned about, get your take on. We don't know what's going to happen with Medicaid and other federal funding, and we don't really have any idea long-term what our economy is going to look like, both in the state and in the nation. But as we have declining revenues as a result of the income tax being phased out, we may be looking at a situation where lines are going in two different directions. As you said, you can't totally control Medicaid. I mean, you can to some degree with the technical bill, but more than likely that spending is going to continue to rise, and you got revenues possibly going in the other direction. We could be looking at a situation where you guys got to figure something out. We got about a minute. What do you think?
Well, I want to echo what you said. I'm real proud. Look, I'm so pleased at this point. I don't want to jinx anything, but to have been the appropriations chairman during what I think is the best economic times maybe in Mississippi's history. And I think we've done a really good job of being fiscally responsible and conservative. And at the same time, I want to point this out. We've invested in things like pre-K. You saw the reports yesterday. We're one of 5 states in the country that meet all the pre-K standards. We've invested in early learning. We've invested in teachers. We've invested in reading and math, and the results are paying off there. We've invested in economic development. We see right now maybe Mississippi's best time for economic development. We've invested in some areas that are very important. But you're right. You have to be cognizant of you're trying to look ahead in my job. Trying to look ahead, be responsible. Thank you, Gerard.
Thank you, man.